Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
It's the summer of 1940. Hitler's forces are poised to invade Britain, and all that stands in their way are the men and women of the Royal Air Force.
As wave after wave of enemy bombers make their way towards Britain, commanders desperately try and figure out where they will strike next.
But this isn't the familiar story of the Battle of Britain, one of tactics, machines and famous names.
In this series, we're going to explore the lost and forgotten tales of the operations room workers, ground crews and pilots who put their lives on the line to defend Britain.
They've all heard of the Battle of Britain, but they've never heard of Archie McKellar.
We'll uncover forgotten documents that reveal the human cost of the battle.
I guess he takes one out before
And relive moments of heroism.
Even when my grandmother was talking about it at the age of 94, it always brought a tear to her eye.
Over 3 episodes, we're going to follow 3 pivotal days from the Battle of Britain. The first is the 15th of August, 1940, when Hitler's attacks began in earnest. The second is the 30th of August, the RAF's most intense day of fighting. Britain's airfields are bombarded and defeat seems imminent. And the third is the 15th of September, when Britain's exhausted defenders gamble everything to win the battle. We'll be telling the story in minute-by-minute detail.
From Scotland to the West Country, Kent to the north of England, we'll discover what it was like as the whole country came under attack, as we retrace the battle in the air.
If that was real, we'd have been hit full on.
And on the ground.
Aircraft at 15.
It was the greatest battle the RAF ever fought.
But at its heart were the people. This is the story of their Battle of Britain.
"6 a.m., the 15th of August, 1940. The Battle of Britain began 5 weeks ago, on the 10th of July. Up until now, Hitler has mostly focused his air raids on the southeast of England. But in just a few hours' time, he will use his Luftwaffe Air Force to try and crush the RAF once and for all. This time, right across the country. At a top-secret location in West London, 19-year-old Joan Fanshawe is arriving for the early shift. I'm heading 18 metres or 60 feet beneath the London suburb of Uxbridge. It's an unassuming location, but it would play a crucial role in the Battle of Britain. This is the operations room for the southeast of England. It's known as the 11 Group Bunker, and it's one of 4 nerve centres from which the Battle of Britain was fought. It was here that Fighter Command were able to track the course of the battle minute by minute and send aircraft into the skies to meet the Nazi attacks. Joan Fanshawe is one of around 50 RAF personnel on the early shift in the bunker on the 15th of August. She's been secretly keeping a diary of her hours in the ops room.
July the 4th is when she joined,
Yeah.
and within 2 weeks, she is sent to Uxbridge.
So was Joan one of the first women who was a plotter?
They were the first group. A week before she joins up, this is July the 5th, the whole day dominated by my thoughts of having my hair cut off tomorrow.
It's a
terrible wrench for having had it long all my life and being my chief attraction, I shall feel rather as if I've lost my individuality without it.
Intercept at Angel.
Joan's diary also tells us about life on the front line.
I didn't think that anyone was allowed to keep a diary while...
She's fairly careful what information goes in there.
Right.
You don't hear anything about what's really going on in there.
Yeah.
But you know she's at Uxbridge, and you know she goes underground.
Right.
Which maybe would be more information that would want to fall into other people's hands. I don't know.
Joan is a member of the WAF. And according to the recruiting brochure, her official job title is Clerk, Special Duties. But she's actually a plotter. She stood on this very spot, and her job was to look after the space between Dover and Calais on this map. She would listen for incoming intelligence and then plot the position of enemy aircraft using these blocks, which represented Luftwaffe raids. And this one here represented British RAF squadrons. Once it was all plotted, that would give her commanders a picture of what was going on in the air. We know about her shift on the 15th of August because she writes about it in her diary.
Got up early to go on duty at 6:45. We were not really terribly busy till the end of the watch when things started to happen.
Joan's shift started quietly. The weather was poor. It was too cloudy for the attacks to begin. But that wouldn't last long.
Also playing a waiting game early that morning are hundreds of RAF pilots up and down the country, including a 28-year-old Scottish pilot at RAF Drem in East Lothian, Scotland. Flight Lieutenant Archie McKellar has already been in the RAF for 4 years. Now he's trying to catch a little sleep after getting back from his night patrol at 4:20 a.m. But Archie isn't a typical pilot. I've come to Glasgow to find out more.
So tell me a little bit about him.
Well, there was John and Margaret, that was his mother and father, and they wanted him to go into the family business, plastering and construction, and he didn't want to do that. Archie wanted to fly.
Right, it was a working-class family, so sort of flying was quite a big dream, really, for a young man like this.
It was a dream, it's something he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He decided I'm going to fly without my parents knowing about this. A typical kind of McKellar thing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Were you the same?
Similar things, yes.
Archie grew up in this former tenement building in Paisley, not the normal background of a pilot.
So he became a plasterer's apprentice with his dad. Given that he did come from this quite modest background, how would he have been able to afford flying lessons?
He saved his wages and went off
and
secretly
snuck off to go and learn.
Fly, and neither of them were aware. They didn't know he was flying at all, but he used to fly over the house and waggle the wings of the plane.
Archie learned to fly at the Scottish Flying Club. In 1936, he was talent spotted as a promising pilot and invited to join the RAF.
How much were you as a family aware of Archie and what he did?
Well, I wasn't aware until I was a wee bit older, and then I found out, and he became one of my heroes.
Archie's impact as a pilot during the Second World War was almost instantaneous. Just weeks after the war began, he was the first pilot to shoot down a Nazi bomber over Britain. This photo is the actual scene. He later became an ace in a day, destroying 5 enemy aircraft in 24 hours. But for now, on the morning of the 15th of August, Archie is waiting for the enemy to arrive.
(11:10 a.m. The clouds clear, and there's a blue sky over Kent. Then, blips appear on the radar. The enemy are approaching from over Calais, around 20 miles away from British shores. They can be over targets in southeast England in less than 20 minutes. It's the first wave of an enormous Luftwaffe raid. The force includes 50 bombers, each carrying up to 1,000 pounds of bombs. Their objective? To destroy Britain's airfields. Protecting the German bombers are dozens of small, fast and deadly fighter planes. The RAF must intercept the raid before it reaches its targets. Every second counts. The largest force seen in the battle so far is about to hit Britain. At airbases, young pilots are waiting for the call to scramble. Among them is William Hopkin of 54 Squadron at RAF Hornchurch. His job is to patrol the Kent coast in his Spitfire. I've tracked down their lost airfield. It's just parkland today, but that morning it was on the front line of Britain's defence.
This was the airfield at RAF Hornchurch. On the morning of the 15th of August, it's very possible that William Hopkin was waiting just over there in the cockpit of his Spitfire, ready for the signal to take off and engage the enemy.
William is the son of a vicar from Bedfordshire. His story has never been told before. I'm meeting someone very close to him, his son, Simon Hopkin.
And there's my father. He joined the RAF at the beginning of 1939.
How old was he?
He was 18. He had literally just started his training when war was declared. He was the youngest of three brothers. The middle brother, Alan, he joined the Air Force in 1938, and Alan had just got his wings and flew his Spitfire over the rectory, and Grandpa and Mother and my father came outside to watch it. I suspect that was probably a catalyst, to my father thinking, this is what I should be doing, I think. So he then joined up.
Simon has a rare artefact, the pilot's logbook that belonged to his father, where he wrote up all his action.
The opening line, when he literally, first time in the air as a trainee in July 1939, his brother Alan is with him as the trained pilot. And so the first line in my father's flying logbook is signed off by his elder brother.
But the two brothers would not be flying together for long.
Tragically, Alan was lost on the opening day of the Battle of Britain. And so there's a tragic sort of three-liner in my father's logbook, which says,
Alan lost in Bristol Blenheim in enemy territory while night bombing Cherbourg.
Yeah, about Cherbourg. So you now got his elder brother, who obviously he hugely looked up to, who was perhaps the inspiration for him joining the Air Force, and now he's gone, and we're just about to start the Battle of Britain.
William Hopkin has only been with an operational squadron for 3 months, and he's never shot down an enemy aircraft before. I want to know what he must have been feeling on that morning. Fighter pilot Air Marshal Cliff Spink, who flew in the RAF for 30 years, is giving me the chance to find out.
How did those young pilots even get up out of their seats and pick their parachutes up?
It's very difficult to imagine or put yourself in the position of someone like that. They would have not only known that there were a lot of pilots not coming back, but there's a level of expectation. He's not wanting to let down either himself, but particularly his comrades. And of course, these young men like William, they either survive the next few days and then will probably survive a lot longer, or actually got shot down and killed very early on.
The task ahead weighs heavily on 19-year-old William as he gets ready for action on the 15th of August.
So I just slot myself in like that?
I'm going to take to the skies in a Spitfire, just as he would have done on that morning.
Now, I'm feeling very secure because you're so tightly in, but what's protecting me? There's no padding, I'm seeing right into the inner works of the aircraft. It seems to me that if somebody shot it, it would just go straight through.
You're smack on. This is relatively thin aluminium. Normally, if anyone's going to shoot at you, he's going to come from behind. So they had armour plate protecting your head on your back. But in truth, there was very little protection for the pilot.
As William Hopkins straps in, he knows what he is expected to do.
He would be flying with either his flight commander or his section leader in a support configuration. They used to say stick, search, and report. In other words, stick to your leader, search around for other enemy aeroplanes, and then report what you've seen.
At 11:18, William is ready to take off from his base in Hornchurch with 54 Squadron. It's going to be a long day. Sitting here in a Spitfire, I'm trying to imagine what it must have been like for him in that moment. But for William Hopkin and 54 Squadron, combat is just moments away.
"11:30. The Luftwaffe raiders are nearing their first target, the airbase at Hawkinge on the Kent coast. Amongst them are a group of 50 deadly dive bombers. 54 Squadron, including William Hopkin, meet the enemy and are ordered to engage. We're very lucky to have William's personal account of the fighting.
He reports, "I followed Blue Leader into the attack when we engaged some Ju-87 dive bombing between Dover and Hawkinge.
I got on the tail of one and managed to fire a fairly long burst using 1,600 rounds. And saw the enemy aircraft dive away steeply with smoke coming out of it."
It's William's first successful score against the enemy.
Not bad for a young man who's relatively new to combat.
But for 54 Squadron, the raid isn't over yet. Leading the German fighter planes engaging William and his comrades on the 15th of August is a formidable opponent, Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland. At 28 years old, Galland has been in the Luftwaffe for over 6 years and will stop at nothing to take down the RAF. He is so successful, the Nazi high command make propaganda films about him.
Here we have a set of pictures which have never been seen on television before and which display the character of Galland.
You get a sense the cocked hat there.
He always cocked it, and even when he was told, "Straighten your hat," off it went again at the cock the moment he'd straightened it.
There's something of the maverick about him, isn't there?
There is. Well, Galland subscribed to the heroic view of the German fighter pilot, and he took that sense of deep commitment, very personal pride, but very independent viewpoint into combat with him, with the complete and utter conviction that he could do what he set himself to do.
By the morning of the 15th of August 1940, Adolf Galland has already shot down over 17 Allied aircraft. And now he's in the skies over Kent. William Hopkin and the pilots of 54 Squadron are in his sights. But they have their very own ace. Al Deer is an extremely experienced pilot. He's only 22, but he's already been decorated by King George VI for his bravery. Aldir spots the fighter planes in Adolf Galland's formation and climbs steeply to engage them.
He gets within 300 yards of them and opens fire. The 8 machine guns mounted on the wings score a direct hit.
But it's not Galland. He is now ready to make his move. Galland swoops through the aircraft of 54 Squadron. Looping around, he gets on the tail of one, spraying it with shells. The Spitfire plummets to earth. It's flown by 25-year-old Polish pilot Wojciech Klozynicki. He's only been in action for 3 days. He manages to bail out, but it will take him over 2 years to recover from his injuries, and he will never fly in combat again. But Galland isn't finished yet. He dies on a Spitfire belonging to 23-year-old Norman Lawrence, who's desperately trying to regroup with 54 Squadron. The plane bursts into flames. Astonishingly, Lawrence survives. For now, Galland has finished and heads back to Calais. William Hopkin and Aldir have come through, but they have watched 2 of their friends from 54 Squadron fall. The life expectancy for an RAF pilot in the Battle of Britain was just 4 weeks. It's been a morning of intense fighting for the pilots and ground crew, but it's far from over. As the dust settles on the morning's raid, the commanders here in the Uxbridge bunker survey the destruction. The Luftwaffe has done serious damage to 2 airfields on the Kent coast, Lymm and Hawkinge, but all of their Spitfires and Hurricanes were able to get airborne before the enemy bombers arrived, meaning not one British fighter was destroyed on the ground. For Hitler's Air Force, it's been a disappointing morning. Midday. No sooner is the morning raid over than something even more sinister is spotted on the radar. Flying from a base in Nazi-occupied Norway, a huge enemy raid is approaching from across the North Sea. Hitler's planes are heading for the north, and Scottish pilot Archie McKellar is in the firing line. Luftwaffe commanders had assumed that the RAF would send all its fighter pilots down south to protect the south coast against the Nazi raids coming over from France. They hoped that the north of England would be left vulnerable. And so they planned to launch a surprise attack there on the 15th of August. At 12:30, over 100 German planes appear in the skies above Northumberland. Despite the enormous numbers of enemy aircraft, the RAF spot the raids nice and early and are able to get their planes into the sky in plenty of time. When the enemy arrive, the RAF are waiting for them. 3 RAF squadrons are in the skies over the north, including 605 Squadron. 28-year-old Archie McKellar is their flight leader. At 1:10, the enemy planes are swarming over Newcastle. Archie spots the formation and orders his men to follow him in a dive attack. He gets on the tail of one German and, using a quarter of his bullets, sends it spiraling. But he was too busy to notice the enemy coming up from behind him. It fires on Archie, hitting him in the wings. Archie keeps flying, diving on the leader of the Luftwaffe formation and shooting him down, before streaking after a lone straggler and sending him crashing into the sea. He later wrote to his mother describing the raid.
Dearest little mother, I'm very well and very pleased with myself. On Thursday, I saw 70 to 80 nasties in one big formation. Whipped into them with my flying. I got 3 down. Everyone gave the nasties the fright of their lives. I was very proud. All my love, Sonny.
It's an incredible result, but not unusual for an exceptional pilot such as Archie. In fact, his talents are so impressive that the RAF actually feature him in a booklet used to recruit new pilots.
So each squadron would have almost like a poster boy as somebody, you need to be like him. There he is, squadron leader, Archibald A. McKellar. But listen to this is just wonderful. There's no room for the slacker. The discipline is strict. Strive to emulate the McKellar tradition. He was the person they wanted everybody to be like.
He was just an incredible guy. There's stories I've heard of him going up into the skies and looking for stray planes before breakfast. as if, I've heard there's stray planes and I'm going up to see if there's anything I can find.
But what's really lovely about this booklet is it gives a real insight. Always, he was immaculate. He shaved and groomed himself every morning, even during the Battle of Britain. He insisted on his squadron following his example. If I have to die, I want to die clean, he remarked to his colleague. Was your dad like that?
My father's like that, yes.
Really?
To this day, every morning, and a shirt and tie on.
For the McKellar family, sharing Archie's story has always been extremely important.
Do you feel proud of him?
Oh, very. Very. I always ask people, have you ever heard of Archie McKellar? They've all heard of the Battle of Britain, but they've never heard of Archie McKellar. It's just an amazing story to achieve so much.
"1345, Archie returns to base. His actions over Newcastle that afternoon are part of a strong response from the RAF. Destroyed German aircraft lie strewn across the ground. The Luftwaffe's attack on the north is a disaster. Despite having fewer planes, the RAF fends off the enemy raids. It's down to Fighter Command's ingenious intelligence system, and the bunker in Uxbridge, where WAF Joan Fanshawe works, is a key piece of the puzzle.
If you look down at the map closely, those little red lines you see in circles around the coast there are showing the range of the radar. And that gives you about a 20-minute warning, so you know when hostile raids are coming in.
In 1940, radar is a brand new, top-secret technology, using radio waves to detect aircraft over the channel. But it has a drawback. Once the planes have passed inland over the radar towers, they become invisible. The solution is distinctly low-tech.
You've got these guys sitting in 1,500 observer corps posts, tracking the aircraft as they came over. They'd have some instruments for estimating height, and they'd be sending the information back to headquarters.
So now the commanders here can see what the radar's telling them and what all these observers are telling them. The details of the enemy aircraft are phoned through to the bunker and placed on wooden blocks, marked H for hostile, with the number of aircraft in the raid. It's Joan Fanshawe's job to plot these enemy aircraft on the map.
10 aircraft and 15.
The Royal Air Force were very keen on getting women involved, wanted to get as many women as it could, doing as many jobs as possible.
So these women that are moving the plots around, like Joan, are a kind of critical part of this machine.
Oh, yeah.
Commanders then have a complete picture of the situation and can send the most appropriate squadron to meet the enemy.
602, 213, squadrons to readiness.
The Germans had no idea this was here and no idea this system existed.
No. I think you could describe this as our secret weapon.
For Joan, being part of this crucial system is not an easy task. On the 15th of August, after her morning watch ends, we can see from her diary that she's flagging.
I lay down a bit after lunch, feeling rather tired.
It was intense concentration when it got busy, and it sounds very tiring. They were on 4-hour watches, but I think when they came off it, they were extremely tired.
But despite the fatigue and seeing some of the worst fighting of the battle so far, Joan is still able to find some light relief.
Had a drill after the watch, and we had to do imaginary saluting of officers to each other. We nearly died with laughter.
We should remember she'd only been in the RAF, about six weeks
yes.
by then, so
Yeah.
it was new, and even how to salute was not necessarily automatic stuff, and it was still very funny for them.
By mid-afternoon, Joan is off her watch, and the early afternoon raids on the north of England die down. But the RAF isn't able to rest. Raid upon raid of hundreds of enemy aircraft flood the skies in the southeast. Just after 3 p.m, William Hopkin is in the air again to intercept one of the multiple incoming enemy attacks. From his pilot's logbook, we can see that it's the 4th time he's been up today.
You're on call 16, 17, 18 hours a day, and within that day in and day out, you're up 3, 4, 5, 6 missions a day. So just the tiredness, but the strain of the fear and of the fatigue must have been extraordinary.
Despite the incredible strain put on the pilots, they keep flying day after day, week after week.
And you look at some of them relaxing in 54 Squadron here. I think it's that bond, that camaraderie that comes through, that when you're part of a fighting unit, you haven't been born together, but a lot of you trained together, you fought together, you socialized together, you've seen a lot of tragedy together. You look at the names of those relaxing on the grass, and of the 4 pilots mentioned there, 3 were lost during the battle. R.I.P., yeah.
Zero aircraft at 15.
1,600 hours. William's movements in the air are being plotted in the Uxbridge bunker, but not by 19-year-old Joan Fanshawe, who has now left the building. It's been an exhausting day. But looking at her diary, we can see that Joan is somehow able to forget about work.
At 4, I dashed off down the station and caught the tube and met Pat Wickens, who was a family friend. We had tea. And
I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I met Jocelyn coming back in the train. We had a snack, and then the air raid siren went. We absolutely dashed back on my bike.
And poor Jocelyn, running. And then by the end of the day, she's saying, pretty much been on watch. We've done damn near over 16 hours today. And that is this extraordinary double life, isn't it, of someone doing this incredible job, really intense, and then going for tea in London.
Going for tea and having a giggle with her girlfriend.
Yeah. Life went on, and she would say that, and it definitely comes over in her diaries. It goes from these exhausted times to sometimes the boredom, and you'd think, really, during the Battle of Britain, there were calms between the storms.
Yeah.
One pilot who's so far managed to avoid the storms today is Peter Cumley. He's based at RAF Exeter in the West Country with 87 Squadron. His Battle of Britain has been spent patrolling the south coast, protecting nearby bases from any Luftwaffe attacks. But as it's outside the main hotspot of the southeast of England, the fighting has been less intense. I'm meeting his Canadian nephew, Richard Cumley.
This is my Uncle Peter as a RAF pilot.
Teenager.
Yeah, 18 years old. That's him with his cap on, full uniform.
Peter was one of 5 siblings growing up in rural Gloucestershire.
You know, there's my father. He's the little guy in the middle.
Sweet little picture.
Yeah. That one's my Uncle Peter.
They did not grow up in the lap of luxury.
No. They were born and raised in Gloucestershire until they moved to Yorkshire. My grandfather wanted to be a farmer. He had a farm until he lost it, and then he went to work for the government. But they did go to boarding school.
Peter spent his carefree summers away from boarding school, playing cricket and fishing.
My grandmother made Peter sound like a really good sport about a lot of things. He really wanted to try and make other people happy.
But it was his adventurous personality that made the RAF his natural calling.
There's nobody in his in our family tree who preceded him in the RAF. He just loved the idea of flying. So this is his license.
So that is 13th of March, 1939. So it's just before his 18th birthday, so he's 17 when he's...
Yeah.
So he obviously had an aptitude for flying.
Yes, he did. He picked it up pretty quick.
So Peter was a good pilot.
You know, before August 15th, he had already shot down 4 before that date.
Despite the calm start in the West Country, for Peter Cumley, the day won't remain quiet for long. 1720. RAF pilots have been in the skies fighting the enemy for the past 6 hours, but it's not over yet. Suddenly, a large raid appears, heading for the Royal Navy base at Portland, on the coast of Dorset. 19-year-old Peter Cumley is scrambled with 87 Squadron. He's about to find himself right in the thick of the action. The National Archives at Kew hold the combat record for Peter's flight. I've come to find out exactly what happened that evening with his nephew.
Let's look up the date for the 15th of August. This is in the afternoon by this stage.
At about 17:30, there was a panic takeoff by both squadrons. What was described as the fiercest dogfight yet experienced then took place. The results of this attack on Portland were as follows. PO, Pilot Officer Cumley, 1 ME-110 destroyed.
That's your uncle?
Yeah.
That's his 5th aircraft destroyed in the war so far.
Yeah.
Peter destroys an enemy aircraft, a huge boost to his squadron. But the combat report also reveals the details of the moment that comes next.
And can you read this bit out here?
Our casualties were Squadron Leader Lovell Gregg and Pilot Officer Cumley killed. P.O. Cumley was able to shoot down an ME-110 into the sea, but unfortunately, another was on his tail, and he followed his victim into the water. I guess he takes one out before... He takes one more out before they take him out. I had hoped when I read it that he went quickly. He didn't end up freezing to death in the channel like some pilots did.
Shortly after the 15th of August, Peter's friend and commander, Flight Lieutenant Ian Gleed, writes to Peter's father.
This is a note he gets back from...
Dear Mr. Cumley, thank you for your letter. One of my pilots saw Peter's plane hit the sea about 10 miles off Portland. He had not used his parachute. After the battle, 2 other planes and myself searched the area but found nothing. It is with very deep sympathy and sorrow that I must tell you that in my opinion, there is very little chance of Peter being still alive. I cannot tell you how much we all miss him. Yours sincerely, Gleed, Flight Lieutenant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were friends.
So it's not an overstatement when he says here how much he missed him.
By 1820, the raid over Portland is over. Several enemy planes are downed, but the RAF has suffered too. They can't keep sustaining these losses. It's been the most intense day of the Battle of Britain so far. William Hopkin is probably in the pub, unwinding with his fellow pilots by now. He scored his first hit against the enemy But 54 Squadron has been badly shaken. 2 pilots have been gunned down. The man responsible is Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland, who is back in Calais, awaiting another day of combat. Elsewhere in Uxbridge, Joan Fanshawe is returning to the bunker for her night shift. In Scotland, Archie McKellar is celebrating shooting down 3 Luftwaffe bombers in one encounter. He's been fortunate, but others have not been so lucky.
Dear Mr. Company, thank you for your letter. One of my pilots saw Peter's plane hit the sea about 10 miles off Portland. He had not used his parachute.
In the 11-group bunker at Uxbridge, commanders take stock.
The Luftwaffe has flown 2,000 sorties. That's twice as many as the RAF, but they've lost 78 aircraft. It was their attack on the north of England that was particularly costly, with 88 of their aircrew either missing or dead. It would be the last time that the Luftwaffe would attempt such large-scale daylight raids on the north.
The RAF have fared better, but there have still been losses. 45 aircraft destroyed, 13 damaged, and 17 pilots killed. But the day's fighting has shown that the squadrons of 11 Group, controlled from this bunker, have been able to hold their own against superior numbers of enemy aircraft.
Churchill has been watching the day's events unfold back at base, 12 miles away at Bentley Priory.
When Churchill left Fighter Command HQ that evening, he described the 15th of August 1940 as one of the greatest days in history. But for the Luftwaffe, who had failed in their bid to destroy the RAF, the 15th of August became known as Black Thursday.
The following day, Churchill commented to a friend that never, in the field of human conflict, had so much been owed by so many to so few. 4 days later, he repeated that phrase in Parliament, in what would become his most famous speech. But had Winston Churchill spoken too soon? Next time, we discover what happens when Britain stands on the brink of defeat.
The worst thing was seeing the planes approaching, but not knowing until the last minute what their target was.
Holy smoke, 3 missing, and you realise the others are crying as well.
We crash forward to the 30th of August 1940. Can the nation survive the most intense day of fighting?
I am seeing this hurricane heading literally straight for our windscreen.
The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
It's the summer of 1940. Hitler's forces are poised to invade Britain, and all that stands in their way are the men and women of the Royal Air Force.
As wave after wave of enemy bombers make their way towards Britain, commanders desperately try and figure out where they will strike next.
In this series, we're exploring the lost and forgotten tales of the operations room workers, ground crews and pilots who put their lives on the line to defend Britain.
We've all heard of the Battle of Britain, but they've never heard of Archie McKellar.
We're uncovering forgotten documents that reveal the human cost of the battle.
I guess he takes one out before it...
And reliving moments of heroism
Even when my grandmother was talking about it at the age of 94, it always brought a tear to her eye.
We've already seen how the RAF held out against superior enemy numbers on August the 15th. Now we're jumping ahead 2 weeks to August the 30th. In tonight's episode, we discover what happens when Britain stands on the brink of defeat, as the country faces its most intense day of fighting in the whole battle. We'll be telling the story in minute-by-minute detail, as we retrace the 30th of August in the air.
If that was real, we'd have been hit full on.
And on the ground.
Aircraft at 15.
It was the greatest battle the RAF ever fought.
But at its heart were the people. This is the story of their Battle of Britain.
(10:30 a.m.) In Nazi-occupied northern France, 160 Luftwaffe aircraft are about to take off. Their targets? RAF airfields in the southeast of England. The Luftwaffe needs to destroy the Royal Air Force if the German invasion of Britain is to go ahead. In just 30 minutes, these planes will be over the Kent coast.
After weeks of fighting, Luftwaffe commanders are under pressure from Hitler to deliver results. So they're planning a final knockout blow, a huge attack designed to eliminate Britain's Air Force once and for all.
It's a day that will push fighter command to the absolute limit and have profound consequences for people on the ground.
There are 21 RAF airfields in the southeast of England. That morning, around 20 squadrons are ready and waiting to protect them. When the scramble bell rings, these pilots will have 5 minutes to get airborne. Over the past 2 weeks, this part of the country has seen the worst of the fighting. But squadrons all over the country are also ready. One is 64 Squadron at RAF Leconfield in East Yorkshire. Amongst the ground crew is Ronald Pounton. Of the thousands who served in the battle, 99-year-old Ronald is one of only a handful who survives. He had the critical ground crew job of armourer.
An armourer looks after guns, bombs, and everything that goes bang.
That day, Ronald prepared his Spitfire for action, then waited for the scramble bell.
As soon as you hear the sound, of course, you're up and running. The pilot comes running like an Olympic sprinter up the wing. The rigger helps him strap in. And the pilot taxis out at terrifying speeds. All the pilots are doing the same. And why there was never a crash, I've no idea. And they then form up in pairs, and they come roaring up, and they're airborne, gone.
(11 a.m). The first attack approaches the Kent coast, over 200 miles south of Ronald's base in Yorkshire.
Intercept at Angel Place.
9 squadrons are scrambled to intercept the enemy. At RAF Tangmere, Tony Woods-Scowen takes off in his Hurricane. Tony is already an incredibly experienced pilot. Although he's only 22 years old, he's shot down 6 enemy aircraft. In the skies above Dungeness, his older brother Patrick, also a Hurricane pilot, is already airborne. At 24, he has 9 enemy kills to his name. In just a few minutes, the brothers will be engulfed in a huge air battle. I'm meeting their relative, Tristan Wood-Scowen, in their childhood home of Farnborough.
Hey Tristan, how are you?
The brothers grew up just a stone's throw from the Air Force base which once occupied this very spot.
They did everything together. They were riding around their motorbikes around Farnborough, and everywhere they went, it was all about aviation. I think it was almost inevitable that they joined the RAF. In 1937, they could see that there was another war on the way, so Patrick signed up for a short service commission with the RAF. Patrick was the older one. I think he was about 22 when he joined and progressed really well. He was a really great pilot.
Younger brother Tony was keen to follow in Patrick's footsteps.
But Tony had a bit of a struggle getting in at the start.
Why?
He was pretty much blind in one eye.
So how did he get his pilot's licence?
Well, he queued up for the eye test and someone came out and told him all the letters. So he memorised them, went in and did passed the eye test. And then he got some prescription goggles made, which was totally not regulation for the RAF. But Tony managed to get them done on the sly, and up in the air he went.
They sound like extraordinary characters.
Yeah, I think they were larger-than-life characters. They lived fast and enjoyed life to the full.
(11:27 a.m.) Over 160 enemy aircraft have crossed the Kent coastline. Patrick's Hurricane Squadron dives out of the sun to attack the bombers. Minutes later, Tony's squadron joins the fray. A series of sprawling dogfights quickly develops in the skies over southern England. For eyewitnesses below, the noise is deafening, as swarms of British fighters swoop on the tails of the enemy. And the Wood-Scowen brothers are in the middle of it all.
The fighting covers such a huge area that one report says that no matter where you were across Kent, Surrey and South London, all you could see were fighters and bombers fighting it out in the skies.
Hurricane pilot Patrick Wood-Scowen shoots down enemy aircraft near Dover. A few minutes later, Tony destroys another. The brothers now have 17 enemy kills between them. But this is just the beginning of a long day. 11:35 a.m. Inside the plotting room at RAF Biggin Hill, members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force monitor the action. One of those on duty here is Corporal Elspeth Henderson. The 27-year-old from Edinburgh volunteered early in the war. Now she's in the thick of it.
In December of 1939, she went to her cousin's wedding. Her cousin was a young lawyer who was in the process of enlisting, and she felt it was morally wrong that he, just married, should be joining up, while she, a single woman, continued to enjoy civilian life.
That's really interesting. So for her, it felt completely wrong that she should be able to sort of really carry on as normal.
Yeah, and she volunteered the following day.
Elspeth is posted to Biggin Hill in January 1940 after just 2 weeks of training.
When she arrived at Biggin Hill, it was quiet. The runways were being extended, so had time to introduce her to radar and to what the job entailed.
As the Battle of Britain begins, Biggin Hill becomes a prime target. Elspeth is the senior WAF on duty in the plotting room. From here, she follows the flight paths of approaching enemy bombers, including those heading for the airfield itself.
She was in charge of the telephone line to headquarters in Uxbridge. My mother used to say that the worst thing about it was seeing the planes approaching, but not knowing until the last minute what their target was.
That must have been terrifying.
Yes, it was.
Today, Biggin Hill is top of the Luftwaffe's hit list.
It's now 11:45 a.m. Patrick Woods-Scowen has been in the air for over an hour. He's running low on fuel and returns to RAF Croydon. Somewhere over Kent, Patrick's younger brother Tony is still surrounded by the enemy. A total of 10 RAF squadrons are now battling it out with the Luftwaffe. Meanwhile, in their hometown of Farnborough, one young woman anxiously awaits news of the brothers.
This is a photo with my granny and Patrick, and this would be Tony there.
Bunny Lawrence is in love with both brothers. Her grandson Ben is showing me some of the letters they wrote to her.
Granny always said how much fun they all had, and they'd all go out on the back of the motorbikes and play the guitar on the beach.
And they both came to sort of fall in love with your granny?
They grew up all very good friends, and I presume, obviously, once they got into their late teens, they fell in love with Granny, both of them.
Patrick wrote this letter to Bunny from flying school.
There's a great letter here, darlingest. I have flown a hurricane, so I've reached the 8th heaven. The 7th, 6th, and 5th heavens are you, but my God, what an aeroplane.
When you write to me, don't forget to enclose a wee lock, a wee braidy of your hair to bring me all the luck in the world. Please write soon.
I think there was a lot of badgering, possibly, from the boys for a photo, and then one of the letters does say, thank you so much for the photo.
So it must have been a pretty intense summer, because they're fighting for their lives, they're fighting for king and country, they're also both falling in love with one of their great childhood friends. It's all happening.
Yes, well, it must have been August at the peak of the Battle of Britain, and my granny and Tony got engaged.
So she chose the younger brother?
She chose the younger brother, yes.
It's almost midday. The RAF is defending airfields from waves of enemy attacks. But one squadron is being held back. The pilots of 303 Squadron, based at RAF Northolt, are preparing for a training flight. The squadron is made up almost entirely of highly experienced Polish pilots. They've survived the Nazi invasion of their homeland and fought the Germans again in France before escaping to Britain. The Sikorsky Museum in London keeps a collection of rare artifacts from this squadron.
This is the chronicle of the 303 Squadron. You have so many different stories, priceless stories.
This record documents the lives of the squadron's pilots, including Flying Officer Ludwik Paszkiewicz.
Is this him here?
Yes,
Are we able
absolutely.
to look at that? It's amazing that we've got a photograph of him.
This is actually Ludwig wearing Polish Air Force uniform, so this picture was taken before the war.
So how old would he have been here, do we think?
I would say his early 30s. He got married in 1937, and 1 year later, his baby daughter was born.
The Battle of Britain gave Ludwig a chance to continue the fight against the Nazis.
For them, it was the island of the last hope. They knew If Britain is going to be invaded, they have no place to go. But because of the experience from Poland, they understood German tactics and they flew similar to Germans.
So does that mean that actually the Poles were more experienced than their British counterparts?
In most cases, yes. Because many of young British pilots, they never experienced combat before.
But before they could fight for the RAF, the Poles need to train on British aircraft.
British equipment was completely different than any other equipment on the continent. Different than Polish aircraft, different than French aircraft. Plus, you know, Poles, they didn't know miles, they didn't know feet, they didn't know yards. They had to convert into British measuring system.
On the 30th of August, Ludwik and the rest of 303 Squadron have been training for almost a month. Yet British commanders are still reluctant to send the Poles into battle.
And they were worried about the Slavic temperament. They thought that Poles, regardless of the British command, they will go for the Germans, which was actually true. They were there to kill the pilot. Because what they experienced in Poland, they saw German bombers dropping bombs on civilian targets. They saw civilians being killed. They left their loved ones in Poland, like Ludwik, for example. He left his wife and his children.
God, he must have been desperate.
Oh, yeah. When he was in France and then in Britain, he knew what he was fighting for.
Right.
He was desperate to go back to his country and to see his family.
Yeah.
At midday, a group of Luftwaffe bombers slips through the net. They evade the RAF's defences and they head straight for one of Fighter Command's most important airfields, Biggin Hill. In the Biggin Hill operations room, Corporal Elspeth Henderson plots the raid as it approaches her own airfield. Just a few hundred yards away, on Westerham Road, is the home of the Greensmith family. It's been a long, hot summer, and 7-year-old Jeff Greensmith has spent his days hunting for souvenirs around the airfield.
Growing up, I think, in Biggin Hill was a bit of an adventure. It was seriously in the thick of it. This actually fell in our garden down the road here. It's dated 1940, and that came from a Hawker Hurricane. They were trying to shoot down on Dornier 17 and actually shot the lock off our front door.
Jeff and his family have special permission to enter RAF Biggin Hill. His parents run the cafe at the base.
It gave the airmen a taste of regular civilian life. It was a friendly place, laugh and joke. My dad was a bundle of fun. And there was a rule, I think probably my dad did it, that you did not talk about the war.
Another unwritten rule of the cafe was not to ask about regular customers who didn't return.
Canadian airman came into the cafe on his own, and he sat down and put his head in his hands, and he said to my father, "Bill, customers are dying like flies." And my dad said, "How many?" They did get shot down in handfuls. And of course, you're in a squadron, it's your mates, your friends.
"12:30, August the 30th, 1940. Today, it's not just RAF pilots who are in the line of fire. At 12:30, 30 of these 250-kilogram bombs are dropped over Biggin Hill. But the Luftwaffe bombers are flying too high. Nearly all of these bombs miss their target and land in surrounding villages. Thankfully, the airfield is still operational. Luckily, Jeff and his family have a bomb shelter and are unharmed. But this isn't the first time bombers have missed Biggin Hill and hit the village.
The fourth bomb landed 20 yards behind our air raid shelter. A huge bang, and the back of the shelter comes out of the ground. It picked me up and moved me through the shelter. I hit the front wall of this thing. Couldn't breathe. And my mother's mouth is going up and down. I was convinced we were dead.
At 1:30 p.m. on August the 30th, the smoke clears and the civilians around Biggin Hill emerge to survey the damage. But the brief respite in the bombing will not last long. Another huge enemy raid is just about to begin.
Fighter Command has spent all day fending off wave after wave of enemy attacks. But unlike previous days, there's been almost no respite, no pause in enemy raids. That means that many aircraft have been lost, and the RAF's fighter pilots are exhausted.
It's 1:35 in the afternoon. More waves of Luftwaffe bombers are crossing the channel. Their targets are more RAF airfields. But destroying the RAF is proving more difficult than Hitler anticipated. Over 450 Luftwaffe aircrew have died this month. Another 800 are missing. Many of those have been shot down and taken prisoner in Britain. One German pilot crashed near Jeff Greensmith's house in Biggin Hill village. Jeff came face to face with the wounded man.
There's a German in a flying suit, and my dad is crouched over him, and my dad is actually giving this badly wounded German a sip of our brandy. And then I'm standing on the doorstep, and the German goes to me. What the German had was a photograph of his two kids. One is a bit older than me, and the other one is the German version of me. And he cried. I'd never actually seen a man cry. Men don't cry. Cried. Anyway, as the two stretcher bearers lifted this guy, he reached out his hand to my dad, shake hands, which he did, and away he went. We heard afterwards that he died in the ambulance, poor soul. So, yeah, not good.
The high casualty rate is affecting Luftwaffe morale. German air crews are demoralized and exhausted. Luftwaffe commanders are forced to use rookie pilots to fill the gaps left by those who've been shot down.
Most of the new pilots that were coming in were complete novices because the Germans have been preparing for essentially a blitzkrieg war. Short, sharp, quick, job done.
So the Luftwaffe, they're running out of experienced pilots. How about aircraft?
They didn't have the spare aircraft, and those aircraft were not being produced in the factories at the pace they needed to replace those that were lost. This is a war of attrition.
Propaganda films shown back in Germany paint a very different picture of the battle.
Der Gruppenkommandeur gibt die Anweisungen für den Feindflug. Das Ziel ist die untere Themse-Mündung.
Bomber crews are depicted as heroes, just days away from victory. And on the afternoon of the 30th of August, they're just getting started. At 3:30 p.m., a third wave of Luftwaffe aircraft prepares to take off from airfields in France. It's a huge force of over 600 planes, and it's intended to overwhelm the RAF.
Incredible, John. God, it's the most amazing view.
I'm going to get a sense of what it must have felt like for the men piloting one of the German aircraft on the afternoon of the 30th of August.
Harvard Blenheim, ready for departure.
I'm in the cockpit of a World War II twin-engine bomber. This is a British one, it's a Bristol Blenheim, but it's very similar to the enemy aircraft that were flying over the southeast of Britain on the afternoon of August the 30th.
This incredible aircraft is piloted by John Romain. From here, I have an almost identical view to that of Luftwaffe aircrews.
In großer Höhe geht es der englischen Küste entgegen.
What is amazing about being in the cockpit of one of these planes is the visibility. All around me there is glass. I feel like I can see at least 180 degrees.
Yeah, that's what you needed, because you needed to be able to see anything that was coming to attack you.
The German formations are flying over southern Britain to their designated targets. Only then can they drop their bombs and return home. They have safety in numbers, but any aircraft that gets separated can be easy prey for the RAF.
Bombers needed to stay together so that their combined machine gun armaments could have an effect against fighters.
Right.
But when they were on their own, everything was on the hunter's side then, because a lone bomber is so vulnerable to a fighter.
Just after 4 p.m, 120 Nazi planes turn north and head for Luton. Their target is the Vauxhall Motor Works, a factory making tanks for the British Army. One aircraft falls behind. The crew doesn't know it yet, but they are about to be spotted by one of the RAF's hunters.
It's 4:15 p.m. At RAF Northolt, Polish pilot Ludwik Paszkiewicz of 303 Squadron is taking off in his Hurricane. He turns north for what should be another routine training flight.
At the same time, the force of 120 German planes is getting closer to the target at Luton. One of them is still flying behind the main formation. I'm in a plane similar to that lone twin-engined Nazi aircraft.
They don't know it yet, but they're about to run into the Hurricanes of 303 Squadron.
20 minutes into his training flight, Ludwik Paszkiewicz spots the lone German aircraft up ahead. He reports it to his squadron leader but gets no reply. So Ludwig takes matters into his own hands. He peels away from the squadron and attacks the German aircraft head-on.
Oh my goodness. I am seeing this Hurricane heading literally straight for our windscreen. It is a sensation I could barely describe. The terror he must have felt.
We can see the Hurricane now coming towards us, and he would have been seeing exactly the same thing. Not being able to maneuver and outpace the Hurricane, knowing he was just going to get shot down. The Hurricane could just literally run rings around a bomber.
Oh my goodness.
The German pilot takes evasive action, but there's very little he can do to escape Ludwig's fighter.
We're diving now, trying to evade the aircraft. It's banking around me now.
But once the Hurricane is behind us, I have no idea where he is.
My heart is absolutely thumping. Fear of those pilots must have been just unimaginable.
Ludwig closes in on his prey. Unknown to the German crew, he creeps up beneath them. When he's just a few feet away, he opens fire. The aircraft's right-hand engine bursts into flames.
If that was real, we'd be gone by now, because we'd have been hit full on with all the machine gun fire, and that would have been the end of it.
Remarkably, we know what happened to the German crew thanks to an extraordinary account from one who survived, radio operator Heinrich Nordmeyer.
My pilot was badly wounded. He had been shot in the stomach. He ordered me to bail out. I didn't want to. I was too frightened. He must have felt that he only had a few more seconds to live, so he threw the cabin roof off, turned the aircraft on its back, and I fell out.
That split-second decision by the pilot saves Heinrich's life. He parachutes to safety and is taken prisoner. The pilot, Georg Antony, goes down with his plane.
When Ludwig returns to RAF Northolt, he receives a rapturous reception from his countrymen. Finally, 303 Squadron is made operational. The Polish pilots can officially take part in the Battle of Britain. It's 4:50 p.m. on the 30th of August. The enemy bombers reach Luton and strike the Vauxhall tank factory, killing 53 people. RAF Detling near Maidstone is hit. The airfield's oil tanks explode and the base is put out of action. Five minutes later, Tony Woodscowan prepares to take off from RAF Tangmere. He's been on the ground just 12 minutes, barely enough time to rearm his Hurricane. Meanwhile, his brother Patrick is back in the air for the 4th time today. The fighting is relentless. Some squadrons will see action 6 or 7 times before the day is out.
It's 5:45 on the 30th of August 1940. The RAF is reeling from a day of almost constant attacks, but there's more to come. Unknown to Air Force commanders, a small formation of enemy aircraft, less than 10 bombers, has come up the Thames estuary and has now turned south. They're heading for RAF Biggin Hill.
It's the second raid on Biggin Hill today. The bombers are flying low and fast. Corporal Elspeth Henderson is still in the ops room. This time, the bombers hit the base.
This is an aerial photograph taken from on board one of the Luftwaffe bombers during the raid. You can actually see the bombs exploding on the ground. The barracks, the hangars, and the power station have all been hit. 3 Spitfires have been destroyed on the ground.
A trench packed full of ground crew, men just like Ronald Pounton, who we met earlier, takes a direct hit, killing everyone inside.
"39 people are dead. RAF Biggin Hill, one of the most important airfields in the southeast, is out of action."
Elspeth survives the raid that day. She is one of the first on the scene to help dig survivors out of the rubble. But the next day, the bombers hit again.
She was the senior WAF on duty in the operations room when Biggin Hill came under attack yet again.
This time, the operations room takes a direct hit.
The bomb came straight through the roof, bounced off the teleprinter and exploded.
Elspeth's telephone is the only line of communication between Biggin Hill and Fighter Command HQ. She stays at her post until the operations room is engulfed in flames.
I can't imagine sitting here with all that noise and catastrophe and being able to carry on.
She said she felt very detached. She was just doing her job.
But she survived.
She did, yes. They all survived.
August the 30th, just after 6 p.m. Luftwaffe bombers are returning to their bases in northern France. They leave a trail of destruction behind them. Much of RAF Biggin Hill, critical for the defence of London, has been reduced to rubble. The RAF is reeling from a day of non-stop attacks. The Luftwaffe have flown over 1,300 missions. At RAF airfields across the southeast, ground crew are watching for returning aircraft. It's an agonising wait.
This is the difficult period. We sit waiting. And we sit waiting, and somebody will always say, "Stone me, they're cutting it ruddy fine." Whoa, big roll, they're back. Magic, they're back. Oh, suddenly you're alive again. We jump to our feet and you count them. 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9. Holy smoke, 3 missing. And you stand there in the pen with the 3 mates. Is it ours? Is it theirs? Then they taxi into the bay, and eventually you know it's yours.
Like so many ground crew, Ronald had to cope with the loss of pilots he served with during the 3 months of the battle.
This is the awful, awful time. There are 2 aircraft in a bay. The aircraft next to you is in the bay, and they're working like smoke, rearming, refueling, and so. And you stand there looking at nothing. And nobody comes to say hard luck or anything. And the 3 of you stand there and you realise the others are crying as well. It's an awful, awful feeling.
How many times did your plane not come back?
We lost 5. And it takes a lot of getting over. You got to know those pilots perfectly, and they became part of the crew. And suddenly, they're not there anymore. And that's ever so difficult to live with.
6:45 p.m. Brothers Tony and Patrick Wood-Scowen are both safely back at their bases. Between them, they've flown 8 missions today and shot down 2 enemy aircraft. But their story doesn't end there. I've come to the village of Ivy Church in Kent to find out what happened to the brothers next.
It must be amazing, Tristan, meeting Ben and realising you've got so much in common.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 2 families have always been connected throughout the years.
With me is Ben Mather, grandson of the brothers' sweetheart, Bunny Lawrence, and Tony and Patrick's relative, Tristan Wood-Scowen.
Unfortunately, tragedy struck. First, Patrick, on the 1st of September, bailed out too low, and then 24 hours later, Tony came down, again, bailed out too low, flying a Hurricane just like his brother. Neither knew about the other's fate. Tony went down just a few hundred metres from here. The tragedy of it is that they both died within 24 hours of each other, and the whole family was devastated.
Tony was found close to his plane and carried here to St George's Church, where he died of his injuries. Bunny Lawrence mourned the deaths of both Patrick and Tony.
Even when my grandmother was talking about it at the age of 94, it always brought a tear to her eye. So it's, yeah, very sad time for the family and my granny.
In June 1941, Bunny accompanied Tony and Patrick's father to Buckingham Palace to collect their Distinguished Flying Cross medals from King George VI. It's now early evening on August the 30th. Flying Officer Ludwik Paszkiewicz is safely back at RAF Northolt. We suspect he is celebrating his first victory of the battle. Meanwhile, 7-year-old Jeff Greensmith is at home in Biggin Hill village. The raid on the airfield has cut off gas and electricity to his family's house in Westerham Road.
For their bravery during the Biggin Hill raids, Elspeth Henderson and 2 colleagues are awarded the Military Medal. They're the first women ever to receive the honour. In later life, Elspeth wrote about the war.
War is a dirty, dangerous and sad way of solving problems and should be avoided. But it was the only language that Hitler understood.
She was very aware of the lives that were lost in general during that time, and it was very important to her that it all should be remembered.
But the same raid that Elspeth survived killed dozens of RAF ground crew. By the end of the battle, more than 300 will be dead.
I'm afraid a lot of Battle of Britain talk is almost saying it was great fun for the... It wasn't great fun for the pilots, and it certainly wasn't great fun for the ground crews. I mean, it was a war. Heavens above, it was a war.
Do you consider yourself a hero?
No. No. I wouldn't use the word hero.
What would you
All
use?
I did was run around like a mad young man on the ground. Heroes? They were the lads up there. They're the heroes.
1900 hours. Hitler's air force has failed to deal the knockout blow its commanders hoped for. The RAF has stood its ground. Just.
British fighter pilots have flown more missions on this day than any other of the battle so far, just over 1,000. Ground crews have barely had time to rearm and refuel aircraft before they're scrambled into action again.
8 fighter pilots have been killed and 39 aircraft destroyed, including 8 from just one squadron.
10 airfields have been hit, some on multiple occasions. RAF Biggin Hill, central to the defence of London, has suffered badly. 39 of its personnel have been killed. And civilians have borne the brunt as well. 200 are dead.
The RAF can't take many more days like this. The outcome of the Battle of Britain is on a knife edge.
In the next episode, we reveal what happens as Britain faces the threat of a Nazi invasion in just a few days' time.
The losses were huge. They would send the squadrons out. Not one of them would come back.
As the Battle of Britain reaches its climax on the 15th of September 1940, the RAF risk everything in the face of a final Luftwaffe onslaught.
This is their finest hour.
The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
It's the summer of 1940. Hitler's forces are poised to invade Britain, and all that stands in their way are the men and women of the Royal Air Force.
As wave after wave of enemy bombers make their way towards Britain, commanders desperately try and figure out where they will strike next.
But this isn't the familiar story of the Battle of Britain, one of tactics, machines, and famous names.
In this series, we're exploring the lost and forgotten tales of the operations room workers, ground crews and pilots who put their lives on the line to defend Britain.
I've all heard of the Battle of Britain, but I've never heard of Archie McKellar.
We'll uncover forgotten documents that reveal the human cost of the battle.
I guess he takes one out before...
And reliving moments of heroism.
Even when my grandmother was talking about it at the age of 94, it always brought a tear to her eye.
We've already explored 2 key days in the twists and turns of the battle. Now, after almost 2 months fighting, we've reached the day that will decide everything. The 15th of September. The Nazis are poised for the final push, and Britain must risk everything to survive. We'll be telling the story in minute-by-minute detail. As we retrace the 15th of September in the air...
If that was real, we'd have been hit full on.
And on the ground.
It was the greatest battle the RAF ever fought.
And at its heart were the people. This is the story of their Battle of Britain.
...7 a.m., Sunday the 15th of September, 1940. The Battle of Britain is entering its third month. In Shoreham, Kent, despite the war, it's hop-picking season. Today, the sky is clear. Perfect flying weather. Which means one thing. Hitler's Air Force, the Luftwaffe, will soon be here.
People in villages like this were about to witness something extraordinary in the skies, the climax of the Battle of Britain. Shoreham was in what was called Bomber Alley. Luftwaffe bombers had to come up this route here from the continent towards London. But barring their way were the Hurricanes and the Spitfires of Fighter Command. The stage was set for what would be the biggest air battle in history to that point.
Hitler is determined that the invasion of Britain will go ahead just days from now. Barges are poised to take German troops across the Channel, but invasion is only possible if the RAF is destroyed first. Today, the Nazis think this is their moment. RAF pilots across the southeast are being monitored from the secret 11-group bunker beneath Uxbridge, West London, where 19-year-old WAF Joan Fanshawe has begun her shift. After spotting an ad looking for educated young women, just weeks later, Joan is now tracking activity in Bomber Alley. So far this morning, it's been quiet. Then, a lone German aircraft is spotted, checking if weather conditions are suitable for an attack. Joan's position in the ops room is over the hotspot, the Dover to Calais crossing. Her job is to plot the position of every enemy aircraft. There is no room for error.
They had to have intense concentration because there was a lot on the table at one time. Like a croupier, as you describe it, you'd push the blocks across the map.
Right.
At first reading it out from a teleprinter, later on the headphones, but it was all fed through, as you say, and then via Bentley Priory to them. It's all part of the system, and they then fed it out to the airfields, who they then scrambled the aircraft, and of course, the real thick of it took place.
Joan's been keeping a secret diary, recording life at Uxbridge.
It's a marvellous place. Our lives are going to be completely different now.
The thing that strikes me, I mean, I know it's a very obvious thing to say, but she looks so young. I mean, she was a teenager.
19, yes, it is young.
19, and doing a job that proved to be absolutely vital to the success of the Battle of Britain.
"20 miles away at Croydon Airfield, 28-year-old Scottish Hurricane pilot Archie McKellar is gearing up for another punishing day. He's enjoying a typical RAF breakfast of bacon, eggs, cornflakes and coffee with powdered milk. We've already seen how on the 15th of August, Archie shot down 3 Nazi aircraft from his base at Drem in Scotland. Now this ace has moved south with 605 Squadron to help defend London. When he arrives in Croydon, he writes a letter home.
I thought you might like to see this.
Oh, wow.
Why don't you have a read of that?
Wow.
Dearest Dad and Mum, here with the news. Arrived down here safe and sound, and by now we're fairly comfortable as we've taken over 10 little houses just outside the aerodrome.
Oh, wow. It's quite incredible that somebody I've followed and done quite as much research as I can. I've exhausted my research online to actually have something in my hand that he has written.
Yeah.
In his writing, and obviously writing of the time as well. That it's very difficult to read. It's incredible. It's lovely to hold this. It's really, really, really nice. I only wish my father could be here today and see this too.
Archie's letter reveals that defending Bomber Alley and keeping the Germans away from London is now the #1 priority.
Fritzy is certainly trying to blow hell out of the big bad city, but is getting a thrashing at the same time. I've now managed to shoot down 3 more bombers and a yellow-nosed ME-109, one of the very super fighter Huns. The boys are all doing very well.
At 10:30, the fragile peace is suddenly shattered. Across the channel in France, Luftwaffe crews receive their orders. Prepare to attack. Radar picks up a signal from enemy aircraft gathering out there across the channel, ready to head in towards Kent. In the 11 Group Ops room, Joan plots the progress of this vast enemy formation of 300 aircraft. If everything goes the Luftwaffe's way, the invasion of Britain is just a few days away. All they need to do is cripple the RAF. Rare footage records the enemy's preparations.
It's never been seen before on television because it was shot by a German fighter pilot, a man called Günther Büschgen. The Nazis thought the Battle of Britain would be another quick victory, and they actually issued cine cameras to many of the pilots in order to record propaganda for audiences at home. This airfield is actually called Coquelles. It's just outside Calais, and it's a different world to what's going on just on the other side of the channel, but it's not that far away, only about 35 miles from Kent. I'm so used to seeing RAF fighter pilots on the ground and in the air that it's just strange to see their opponents here. It does change the way you think about the Luftwaffe. But for me, they've always been portrayed as the distant, the enemy. You see them being shot down. Here, you develop some sympathy with them because you're watching them smile and lark about just like their adversaries. We know that Gunther's plane was a Messerschmitt 109. It had White 11 written on it. So... Oh, there you go, White 11, that's Gunther's plane.
Despite how familiar they appear, the German pilots have a job to do. To destroy the RAF.
We know that Günther wasn't just a great cameraman, he was a heck of a fighter pilot as well. He shot down 6 RAF fighters during the Battle of Britain.
And on the 15th of September 1940, Luftwaffe pilots, just like Günther, are heading for Britain to end the battle once and for all. It's 11:18 a.m. A vast Luftwaffe attack force is getting closer to the Kent coast. RAF Fighter Command orders a mass scramble. 27 RAF squadrons take to the air over northern Kent, waiting.
Here in Dover, observers spot the first wave of Luftwaffe aircraft heading across the channel. They're heading straight up Bomber Alley towards London.
Furious dogfights break out all around, and Archie McKellar leads 605 Squadron into the mass of German aircraft. He shoots down 2, which disappear into the clouds. 12:20. In the skies are around 250 RAF planes, battling to block the incoming enemy onslaught and defend London.
Among them are the Polish pilots of 303 Squadron, including Ludwik Paszkiewicz, who's already shot down 4 enemy aircraft during the Battle of Britain. Him and the other Poles are patrolling over Folkestone when they spot an enemy raid. They engage, and in the ensuing battle, 8 Messerschmitts are shot down and 2 Dornier 17s.
And Paszkiewicz shoots down one of them.
Despite Paszkiewicz's expertise, the RAF insists the Polish squadron must be led by an English speaker. I've come to the Sikorsky Museum to look at Paszkiewicz's journal. It has an entry in Polish for this day.
What does he have to say about the 15th of September?
Being a typical Pole, he again complains about his leader. He says, for example, his leader didn't see the German aircraft being in the area. And thanks to his maneuvers, the whole squadron broke into pieces. He wasn't very impressed.
Right. So do you think that the Polish pilots, like Ludwik, still felt slightly kind of put out that they had a British commander rather than a Polish
Absolutely. They were questioning their abilities and skills. For them, they were just headless chicken, flying modern aircraft with no experience, especially with no combat experience, whilst most of Polish pilots, including Ludwik, they had massive flying and fighting experience from France and from Poland.
With their aggressive flying, the Polish 303 Squadron shot down 126 enemy planes. Other squadrons managed around 90.
"12:30 p.m. The skies are still full of 250 RAF fighters and hundreds of enemy aircraft. On the ground, 5-year-old Raymond Cornwall from Shoreham is watching the action overhead.
So that's the little boy that watched Hitler's Air Force heading to and from London every day.
Yes, afraid so.
And was the village ever attacked specifically?
Yes. Now, this was one morning that I certainly remember. Messerschmitt 109E. It came from the south up through Filston Lane, and it was right just at treetop height. It was very low, and I literally stopped, and it went straight across the village. And as it got as far as the Church Street, it started going, this machine gun right up through the village. And I think that upset one of the people up there, old Joe Suckett. It killed one of his rabbits, but fortunately no one else was killed.
Dogfights are now being fought all over Kent.
One such dogfight happened after midday when fighting is at its peak. The Spitfire pilot is 21-year-old Tony Lovell of 41 Squadron. On the 15th of September, Tony describes attacking German fighters just as the afternoon began. He writes,
We broke up to attack Me-109s, which were attacking us. I sighted my 109 turning east and diving. I dived after him and chased him for some 15 miles in and out of clouds.
The attack comes to a head over Adisham Woods near Canterbury. Amazingly, the German pilot that Tony Lovell is chasing also recorded the incident.
The Me-109 was being flown by Luftwaffe pilot Herbert Chopper, and he also left a combat report, and here it is. He says, during a turn,
we were attacked by Spitfires coming out of the sun. My plane was hit in both wings. I wanted to get back to France, thinking of my fiancée, and I tried to hide in the clouds. However, I was hit by a second burst.
Tony Lovell has critically damaged Chopper's plane. The German pilot has no choice but to bail out.
A third burst hit home. An explosion followed, and I found myself hanging from a parachute. 2 Spitfires circled me. The first pilot saluted, and I did the same.
And these are the woods in which he landed.
Tony Lovell continues fighting until 12:45, helping his squadron claim another 2 German aircraft. By lunchtime on the 15th of September, the Luftwaffe has lost 18 planes, the British 13. Neither side knows if they will end this critical day with victory or defeat. After a morning of high drama, suddenly, all is quiet. The enemy are at bay, and the RAF can pause for breath. In the Uxbridge operations room, 19-year-old Joan Fanshawe finishes her shift, as her secret diary reveals.
September the 15th. On duty till nearly 1 o'clock, because Churchill's upstairs and we could not change over in a blitz.
So would she usually have come off
at 12? Yes, so she was a bit fed up.
I was in a fit because I was going to meet Eva and her father at Hammersmith at 1 o'clock. However, I found they were waiting when I got there. We were going to have lunch when the sirens went, so we had to go to the shelter.
So Churchill was actually at Uxbridge?
He certainly was. There were several days where in her diary she mentions Churchill being there and even the King and Queen.
And that's all she has to say about it, that Churchill actually scuppered her lunch plans.
That is pretty much what she's saying.
I love your mum.
The juxtaposition between the two, isn't it? Between the extraordinary busyness of what's going on in her workplace and then trying to fit a social life around it, and being scuppered by an air raid.
And Churchill, in fact, being slightly scuppered by Churchill.
1,300 hours. At RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire, Flight Sergeant John Hanna is fast asleep. In another few hours, he will be airborne as a rear gunner in a British bomber, a 2-engine plane designed to drop bombs on the enemy.
We all remember the famous speech by Winston Churchill where he praised the role of the fighter pilots during the Battle of Britain. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. But what people tend to forget is in that same speech, he goes on to praise the role of bomber command pilots. We must never forget, night after night, our bomber squadrons travel far into Germany, find their targets in the darkness, and inflict shattering blows upon the Nazi power. Churchill was in no doubt of Bomber Command's contribution to victory.
Like Archie McKellar, Sergeant Hannah is a working-class boy from Paisley in Scotland and has been in the RAF for a year. But today is a day that will change his life forever.
On the 15th of September 1940, the 18-year-old John Hannah was on his way in a Hampden bomber to attack the German barges. But there are no Hampdens still left flying today, so I've come up with a very similar aircraft, also a two-engine bomber from the time, known as a Bristol Blenheim. They were very restricted inside. They were known as the flying suitcase. And we're off.
And we're off.
So John Hannah was a wireless operator and a machine gunner, apparently.
Yeah, so he would have been in the rear in this aeroplane.
How dangerous was it to be a bomber crew in 1940?
The losses were huge. You know, it was the case they would send the squadrons out to bomb various bridges, and not one of them would come back.
And if they did get struck by enemy fire, was there any chance that the crew might survive?
If they were high enough, they could bail out. There's a bailing out hatch in front of you there, or the pilot would go through the roof. But the chances of doing that successfully were pretty small, and lots of the crews actually simply didn't make that.
After attacking German troop barges near Antwerp in Belgium, John and his crew are battered by heavy anti-aircraft fire.
In the midst of the attack, an incendiary projectile hit the aircraft and exploded inside the bomb compartment. A fire broke out, which immediately engulfed John and the tail gunner's position. Now, in order to fight that fire, you've got to somehow maneuver your way around this tiny aircraft, and that wasn't easy. John started to move around the aircraft, desperately trying to fight the fire. The fuel tanks had been punctured, so there was a danger of it spreading and engulfing the entire aircraft. He found the extinguishers. He used them both up. When the extinguishers had run out, he beat the flames down with his logbook. He looked back and saw the tail gunner had already bailed out of the aircraft. By this stage, the heat was so intense that the aluminium was starting to melt, but he still went on fighting the fire. Ammunition was exploding everywhere. John was nearly blinded by the heat, but he did manage to get the fire under control. An act of extraordinary bravery, heroism, and skill. And he crawled forward to notify the pilot that despite his terrible wounds, the aircraft was safe and they could continue to fly in it.
For his incredible bravery, John Hannah was awarded the Victoria Cross. At 18, he was the youngest recipient in the Second World War. At 2 p.m. A second gigantic wave of Luftwaffe aircraft, 550 strong, is crossing the channel.
At the Uxbridge Nerve Centre, plotters are tracking the progress of a huge fleet of German bombers. RAF High Command know that the Luftwaffe are going to throw everything they have at this, their final push to crush the RAF. In turn, the RAF is throwing everything it has at defending London. At one point, Churchill, sitting in his chair up there, turns to Air Vice Marshal Park and asks, "How many aircraft do you have in reserve?" The answer is none.
At 2:25, Fighter Command risks everything. Every pilot takes to the air. Among them is 19-year-old William Hopkin, who we met defending the south coast on the 15th of August. The rest of his squadron have been sent north to rest. But William is considered fit enough to keep flying. So today, he's still on the front line.
So he had no break whatsoever. See, he then continued throughout the busy period of September, right through to the end of battle at the end of October, with no break, no rest, no whatsoever. And then once the battle was over, he then continued through till the following August, September 41, by which time he'd been in the front line and operational daily for over a year. In fact, 14, 15 months. And he was quite clearly exhausted, fatigued, and I suspect, you know, today we'd probably potentially might be calling it other things to this day. But, you know, I do remember my mother telling me that when she married him in 45, he was skin and bone. He had no weight on him, no flesh on him at all. He smoked like a trooper. He had a dreadful tic, you know, constantly moving his head, all which were obviously indicative of the long-term strain that he was suffering from at that time.
The stress of combat is as high as ever on the afternoon of the 15th of September, as William intercepts a formation of 20 enemy aircrafts over Beachy Head. 3 German bombers are destroyed, but William loses yet another comrade. Despite his experiences, William manages to fight on. But for some pilots that day, the pressure became too much. Dr. Salia Ashan, a former army medic, has found a document revealing the RAF's attitude to those pilots.
So if someone presented with they might have said a nervous illness with psychiatric symptoms, what was the protocol?
Today, we would possibly think of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but that term today had a whole load of different names at that time. One of the things that they describe it as is lack of moral fibre.
And if you were diagnosed with lack of moral fibre, what happened to you?
It was like a death sentence to your career. And within the Air Force itself and beyond, it was like being branded. You were not allowed that normal, natural reaction to a horrific experience.
I think these young men were trapped in a system where they faced death or disgrace.
Yeah.
For most pilots, including the young William Hopkin, there was no choice but to keep flying and fighting. It's 14:30 on the 15th of September. 550 enemy planes are now over Kent. William Hopkin is still fighting. And now Scottish ace Archie McKellar has rejoined the action with 605 Squadron. His combat report reveals the drama unfolding in the skies.
Now, what becomes clear from this report that he wrote at the end of the 15th of September is that it wasn't just one formation that they were taking on, it was 2. So he hit a bomber in that first formation, and then he talks about seeing another formation.
I then noticed Tracer going past my right wing from another Messerschmitt. I dodged him and continued to climb into the sun. By this time, another bomber formation of 24 aircraft was approaching with no obvious fighter escort.
So he carried on a head-on attack again on the leader of the formation and saw his perspex burst and enemy aircraft spun down. Could you imagine what that must have been like?
I can't, no. I just couldn't. It must have been so frightening. But he was so determined.
Yeah.
Such a determined, very, 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 very determined man.
No, I just can't imagine the level of bravery.
It was just something they did, something that they thought that they had to do. They had to protect, they had to protect the country, so that's what they did.
The wave of German aircraft by now stretches for 10 miles and is heading for London. As the RAF attempt to break up the swarm, fierce dogfights break out over Romney Marshes, Maidstone and Dartford. The Polish 303 Squadron is in action over Gravesend, and enemy bombers are now over Surrey. The Nazi High Command believe that now, finally, London is theirs for the taking. But the RAF has a powerful new tactic. A big wing, or super squadron of 56 planes flying in formation at 16,000 feet, now arrives over Maidstone. It is a complete shock to the Luftwaffe pilots, who are now faced with the most British fighters they've ever seen. They scatter. But there is one German fighter pilot who is determined to ensure victory. Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland.
Leading this gigantic Luftwaffe raid is one of the Luftwaffe star pilots. What's he expecting in his fellow pilots when they arrive over London?
Well, they're told that there's about 40 aircraft that they're going to encounter, which Galland always believed was probably highly inaccurate. He estimated there'd be probably twice as many. In fact, there was more than 250 aircraft that they encountered on that day, and that was a total shock.
I mean, it must have been devastating for their morale.
Well, it certainly was, and it was a completely unexpected encounter. The German fighter forces were completely overwhelmed.
Suddenly, the RAF has gained the upper hand, but the next few hours will be critical. It's Sunday, the 15th of September 1940. So far, 2 waves of Luftwaffe bombers, escorted by fighter aircraft, have crossed the Channel to attack London. It's mid-afternoon, and that second wave is pounding Britain's capital city. The German bombers are carrying 120 tons of explosives. But the sheer number of RAF aircraft in the skies inflicts a serious psychological blow against the Luftwaffe, who are facing an unanticipated defensive force. In confusion, the German bombers miss their targets, and their bombs are scattered randomly right across the city. The RAF push back the German raiders with such ferocity that 50 Luftwaffe bombers turn and flee to France. German ace Adolf Galland fights on, notching up his 33rd kill, taking out another Hurricane. But the RAF managed to break up the Luftwaffe's formations. A corner has been turned. The German bombers ditch their bombs in panic as the RAF chase them to the coast. At 3:45, the last enemy bomber disappears from the radar.
By mid-afternoon, the fighting was over for another day. Around 1,500 planes had taken part in the air battles.
The RAF has had serious losses today, 26 planes. But for the Luftwaffe, it's far worse. 56 aircraft destroyed, the most on any day in the Battle of Britain. In Berlin, the alarm bells are ringing. These losses are simply unsustainable.
Stephen, at the end of the day, on the 15th of September 1940, what has the Luftwaffe learned about the RAF?
They were expecting to find the RAF on its knees, and in fact, what they found was a defensive force that appeared to be, and was in fact, stronger than ever before. They'd spent all that time thinking that they were going to destroy them, and they realized that they were just as far away from that goal as they'd been in August when they started. They finally realized that they'd been spending a whole month getting absolutely nowhere. It was a shock.
How important were these young men?
It's quite arresting to actually come across genuinely modest men who simply thought they were doing their duty, which is what Churchill asked the whole country to do. If we but do our duty, people will say, this is their finest hour. And that, for them, I think, in many ways, it was.
1600 hours. With the skies now clear of Nazi fighters in the operations control room at Uxbridge, the tension eases. Even the Prime Minister, who's been watching the day's events unfold, feels able to leave. And Joan Fanshaw's secret diary records the moment.
There's just a little bit more that comes up later, and that is that when Churchill did disappear, all the girls then went up and found his cigar and carved it up amongst them. So obviously he was, well-known celebrity with his cigar as their Prime Minister, of course, and so it wasn't without some knowledge of
where they were. They would keep little souvenirs of bits of his cigar.
They did indeed.
Funny. How funny.
At the end of her shift, clutching her cigar souvenir, Joan left work and met her friend. She never discussed her war work till much later in her life, but her secret diaries give us a personal insight into those crucial few days.
But for the pilots on both sides of this bitter conflict, the story did not completely end on the 15th of September. Just 12 days later, pilot Ludwik Paszkiewicz was shot down. He didn't survive the crash landing in Kent. His family would never see him again.
And do we know whether Paszkiewicz's wife and daughter survived the war?
Yes, his wife survived the war. Unfortunately, his daughter died only a year after Paszkiewicz's death. She was ill and she passed away in 1941.
For Archie McKellar, it's been a frantic day, but one he has made it through.
I think that the fact that they just went into battle again and again and again, multiple times a day, how they had the mental resilience to do that.
It was incredible. I think absolutely incredible. The enthusiasm as well.
After shooting down 21 enemy aircraft, Archie finally met his end. He was shot down and killed on November the 1st, just 8 hours after the Battle of Britain ended.
Tony Lovell, who had forced Herbert Chopper to parachute into Adisham Woods, died in a crash landing 3 months after the end of the war in Europe. Herbert Chopper spent the next 6 years as a prisoner of war, during which he was married to his fiancée back home by proxy. When he finally returned to Germany after the war, he met his daughter for the first time. John Hanna, awarded the Victoria Cross, aged 18 for bravery, was left physically and mentally scarred by his experiences.
The story has a desperately sad postscript. The following year, he developed tuberculosis, and that forced him to stop flying. He became a taxi driver in desperation to support his wife and 3 small daughters. He lost an unequal struggle in 1947, dying on the 7th of June, aged just 26.
A year after September the 15th, William Hopkin was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and promoted to Flight Commander. He survived the war, but died in 1971, aged just 49.
General Adolf Galland eventually claimed 104 aerial victories. He survived the war, only dying in 1996. He and many other pilots openly blamed their high command for the Luftwaffe's tactical blunders during the Battle of Britain. Historian David Baker met Galland, who remained forever impressed by the young British and international pilots he faced.
He looked me straight in the eye and he said, "When we came to fight the RAF, we finally had an adversary worthy of us." And that summed it up. And it summed up the approach he had toward all RAF fighter pilots who fought courageously for their side of the battle. And that sustained throughout the war and long afterwards as well, for the remainder of his life. And as further testimony from his words directly here.
I can only express my highest admiration for the British fighter pilots, who, although numerically at a disadvantage, fought bravely and indefatigably. They undoubtedly saved their country in this crucial hour.
Battle of Britain raged for 113 long and perilous days throughout the summer of 1940.
And in the end, it all came down to this short, almost unassuming document. It was issued by the enemy's high command on the 17th of September 1940. In it, they ordered that plans for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, should be verschoben, postponed until further notice. The history books record that the Battle of Britain officially ended on the 31st of October 1940, but the tide turned on this crucial day, September the 15th.
And although the war would go on for another 4.5 years, it was this moment, this victory, that gave hope that the Nazis may yet be beaten.
And this was a victory of the ordinary people. Not just the few, but the many. The unsung, the forgotten heroes whose bravery and sacrifice ensured that Hitler would never reach these shores. This is their story.